Welcome back to Pour Temecula. This week we're following up on our recent episode about wine certifications by taking the conversation one step further with someone who bridges both the academic and professional sides of wine education. Today's guest is Stephanie Staab, a sommelier, WSET Diploma Candidate, and luxury wine consultant with over a decade of experience in winery business, marketing, and education right here in Temecula Valley. She teaches Winery Business Principles at Mount San Jacinto College. She's an NYU graduate. She holds an MBA in Luxury Brand Management from ESSEC in Paris and runs her own consulting company, the Luxe Sip, where she brings wine to life through events, strategy, and personalized advising. In this episode, Stephanie shares with Shannon how collegiate-level wine education differs from programs like the WSET and the Court of Master Sommeliers, offering insight into how real-world experience intersects with theory. We talk about keeping non-wine students engaged, the unexpected career paths that aren't often highlighted in traditional wine tracks, and what the next generation of wine professionals really needs to thrive. It's a thoughtful, informed look at what it means to teach wine today. Let's get into it. Here's Shannon's conversation with Stephanie Staab.
Which wine certifications do you have?
I have a lot. So the recent one that I'm working on right now is the WSET Diploma. Stands for the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. The level 4 is an advanced level diploma. It's the highest level that they offer. I've also done my level 1 Sommelier with the Court of Master Sommeliers. Did that, I think, about a year ago. And then I've done the local training certification called CHIP, and it's called the Certified Hospitality Industry Professional. They had 2 levels, so I did that a long time ago, like 7 years ago or something, when I was at Avonsall Winery. And I did the management level of that, and I believe they're still doing these courses. And it's just a little bit of everything, and they bring in different kinds of speakers held at the wineries locally to train. It's all professionals that already work in wineries that take that certification. But I also do have my MBA, Master of Business Administration in Luxury Brand Management, where alcohol was one of the pillars of luxury. I did study that in Paris, France, if you want to consider that part of, I guess, certifications as well.
What inspired you to do all of that?
So let's see here. I was born in LA, and then we lived in Singapore when I was little. We traveled a lot, and then ended up moving down to this area when I was in first grade. My dad had built his own airplane, and he was flying around, and he found this property, and he's like, I'm going to build a house there. And he loved Frank Lloyd Wright, so he built this house on a mountain in Fallbrook, and it's literally like all windows. We had no curtains. And so I was like, going from being world traveler to being stuck on this mountain in the middle of nowhere with no humans, and it was so boring. And so I always just dreamed of going to New York City and Europe, and I was really into art. So I ended up going to New York University, and I did a double major in art history and architecture with a French minor. And so one of their main things that attracted me was they have a really good study abroad program. So I got to do study abroad in London and in Paris, and it covered my architecture, art history, and French credits, so that I didn't waste any time, and it counted towards my degree. And when I was living in Paris, they were really cool and took us around to a lot of different extracurricular trips. And so we were taken to Bordeaux, France. And so my first experience drinking wine was in Bordeaux, France, drinking Bordeaux. And it was this guy that had this winery in the family for generations, and he told these stories about how they had, hidden the wine, for the good wine from the Nazis, and he had sold like 200 bottles. It's from like 1898 or something. He sold it at auction, at Sotheby's wine auction, and it was just such a fascinating world. And then I had met my best friend there, and her family was all from Portugal, and her grandparents made wine and olive oil in Portugal. So I had spent a summer with her in Portugal, And I was, tasting the local food and the wine of, her grandparents. I remember just like being at lunch and they pull this jug of wine and they're, pouring wine for us. And so just being in Europe, it was like this magical world of wine and it just really got me excited. But back then I didn't really think of that as a career path. It's like I grew up, my parents, like we didn't have alcohol in the house. And I remember my mom would drink wine like at her events, but like it was not a part of, and we had like, literally we're growing up eating like Kraft mac and cheese, things like that. So when I went to Europe and tasted, all the foods of Europe and then how when you would go to anyone's house, the wine pairings that would go with it was really just like, I've heard you talk about that before, like being in Italy and just like the wine and the food as part of the overall culture. And wine's not just like a separate thing to analyze or, try to find the flavors of it, but it's just part of the lifestyle and the tradition. So that just got me really excited about wine. And so then when I ended up coming back to California after living in New York City and Paris, I was like, well, what am I going to do with my luxury degree? And so it was like, okay, well, the wine country is right here, and that's like our luxury industry. So I came out here and I got a job actually at Ponte Winery first. Then I ended up at Avansol, and I've worked with a few different wineries out here. And just being involved in it, I guess I just always wanted to learn more. So just various opportunities came up along the way. And like the WSET Level 2 was being taught at a local winery. So I was like, okay, I'll just do that after work. And then, I had a friend that was doing the Sommelier degree. And I'm like, well, I work with the public. So that focuses more on service. I was like, that would be interesting. Plus, the name is much more well-known than WSET. Well, that is very famous for a reason. So I would like to learn what they have to say about wine. Just working locally with the different organizations, that's how I ended up with the CHIP certification.
For you personally, how did those certifications impact your career?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like I'm a person that always likes to learn more and I always ask why and I want to know what's happening with things. So it's very interesting to learn about, especially working out here, working in the vineyards, seeing the life cycle of the vines and just learning more about how that impacts the flavor that's in your glass. That was very appealing to me. And I was already spending so much time in the vineyards and in the winery and, also seeing the production happening, being a part of that, just seeing the whole picture. And then I think doing the studies to learn more of the technical terminology and procedures and things like that just kind of gave me a better way to understand things and also explain things because I traditionally have worked in marketing a lot. And so that's a lot of explaining and storytelling. The more I could know, the more that I could sort of share with other people and also through the education I do as well.
Do you think that having certifications are important if you're in the wine industry?
Well, it's really funny. And also back to your last question, I was thinking about this even more than it is maybe for your career is I've met so many, like we met each other in the level 3 and I met Jordan Parker over in level 3 and I worked with his winery briefly. And so I feel like more than anything, it's been a really interesting way to meet other people that are kind of like-minded and want to learn more. And also, if you're working in a winery, sometimes you could just end up spending a lot of time with those people. So doing something like this, I think is actually a really good way for community to come together and like learn together and kind of like uplift the knowledge as a group. But okay, so for your career, I guess it depends on where you are and what you're doing. I haven't really seen that if you get a certification that it's going to help you in any job here to like get a promotion or get a position that pays anymore. But I feel like it's more if you feel like it's going to help yourself do your job better, that's kind of more, I guess, what it's useful for right here in Temecula, and it could be different in other wine regions.
What advice would you give to somebody who's considering pursuing a certification?
Okay, so this one's really important because I have a tendency to just want to do things that are really hard and difficult. So that's why I was really drawn to the diploma. I'm like, oh, wow, I know about wine and I'm super smart, so I definitely can do this. It's super time consuming and it's also very expensive. Just thinking about why do you want the certification? and how is it going to fit in with your life? Like once you get your certification, what is that going to do for your career, for your life? And during the time that you need to be studying to get your certification, do you have enough time? Do you have people that you can do tastings with? Is that the best place you want to spend your money? From what I've seen locally, you're not going to get paid anymore, even if you have a higher knowledge or set of certifications. So it might not be an investment that you're going to get back financially. I think it's very personal for each person as to what your motivation is for getting these certifications.
How does teaching wine in a collegiate environment differ from teaching in certification programs like WSET or Court of Masters?
Yes. So I feel like these are two totally opposite experiences. But I think the big difference is that for college, you're getting credits. And like I teach a wine business class at the local community college here, Mount San Jacinto College, the Temecula campus. And my class, for example, can count for business credits, and it can also count towards a wine certificate through the college. So I get a lot of different backgrounds of people, and some people have never even tried wine. So that's like my first question now. I'm like, has anyone like not tried wine before? Because literally there's people that have never tried wine before. We take it for granted because we're in the industry. We're not starting from a place where everyone in that environment knows or even cares about wine. And if they're doing it for business units, maybe they think, oh, that might be interesting and like less boring than, studying accounting or whatever they have to study. So I think that it's more usually tied in with business interests or with business interests, and then you might have like the viticulture aspect or things like that, and specific to what kind of, degree you're getting. And whereas like WSET and the Sommelier is very specific on knowledge of memorizing every single grape that grows in every single geographic region. You have to know the names of the rivers and the flow of the oceans and like where the wind comes from and where the mountains are. And so you're learning a lot about geography and a lot of like laws and regulations in different countries and how those affect the flow of wine to different countries. And you're kind of covering a lot of like a specific set of knowledge, but a lot of it within one section. Whereas like for a college degree, you're going to be taking multiple classes, and then they probably would have, different topics. Like I know in the wine certification, we have at MSJC, it's pretty small, but we have a hospitality class, we have my wine business class, we have enology class, and then a viticulture class. So those are the four that make up that certification.
For the students that don't have tasting experience, or maybe that's not their passion in life, how do you keep the wine education aspect of it relevant and engaging with those students?
Okay, so this is actually my favorite part, and my class at MSJC is very popular. I do a lot of real-world projects in my MSJC class, so like for the midterm, everyone was working up to that, making a wine club. And so it was like, business and HR and everything, how it comes together in real life, making a wine club. And then at the end, the final project was making a business plan. Every project was meant to be relevant and not just like some boring like quiz and, fill in the blank, because I think that's boring and a waste of time. Also, I like to teach it in words that people can understand, that they can remember, and they can go home and use themselves with their friends and their family. And then if someone has maybe a higher level of knowledge and they want to learn more, that's when I could tell them more specifically. But I never try to talk down to people or talk very technical to people that do not have a background in wine, because that makes people have a bad experience. And that's kind of like the opposite of what wine is about.
On the other side of things, do you find that the students coming from certification backgrounds, like having WSET 3 or diploma, do they approach wine differently than those in the college level course?
Okay, yes. So here's the funny thing about this is that as people progress, they end up using different terminology and different vocabulary, and they have a different set of reference in their flavor palette and their experiences. Maybe they've gotten scholarships and traveled, and seen vineyards in different countries and things like that. So you're kind of like self-selecting, and then people start talking like really wine nerdy. And I think that could be super intimidating for outsiders. And I think that could really scare off a lot of people.
Do you see many of your students pursue careers in the industry? And if so, like what kind of roles do you see them go into?
Okay, so this is such an interesting question because I feel like in my class at MSJC, a lot of people come in and, they're like, oh, I want to work at a winery, or I want to make my own winery, or I bought a house and it has a vineyard and I want to make it into a winery. So, I do have a lot of people that really want to make that into a career. It's interesting because, working in the industry for a decade or more, you have to have a lot of grit to be able to kind of like last in this industry, because it could be really tough and it takes a lot of perseverance, I guess you could put it that way. So I do tell people like, okay, yeah, you might have your MBA, but you're probably going to start as like a bar back or a host, it's an industry where you have to work your way up. Like, it does not matter. It also does not matter if you have a certification. Oh, you have a level 3 WCT? Okay, you're still going to start as a host because you have never worked in a winery and proved that you know how to do those roles. So it does not matter your education, your background. You need to get real hands-on experience. So I tell everyone, oh, okay, and here's another tip is that it's very old-fashioned here, and a lot of the jobs are on the floor. So you're not going to get a lot of luck just emailing your resume to someone. So I tell people, print out your resume, take a day, go to wine country, and literally go in person and try to find a manager. Go on a Wednesday or a Thursday because those people are off on Monday and Tuesday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday are busy. No one will want to talk to you. So I've actually had people have success, starting as a host at a winery, and then getting promoted to server. Then you start making more money and interacting with customers. So that's very cool. And then I actually had another student that she had completed her level 3, but she was super shy. So I was thinking like, oh, I don't know how that's going to work for her. But she ended up founding like an online very cool company that, has like these clever t-shirts and, like little wine cups and everything. So she was able to do something like adjacent to that. And so I was like really proud of her. And then I have had students that have created their own brands. Like they had, a winery, but, it was like, oh, well, I don't need social media. Like, I'm like, okay, so how is anyone going to find your delicious wine, And, oh, I don't need a wine club brochure. It's like, okay, well, then how are people going to know what you have to offer, And we do a lot of fun stuff with like working with AI, and I totally encourage AI in my class. And, you can even create logos on that, and you can create like your vision statement and your mission statement and things like that. So we do a lot of work with real world principles so that people can actually apply that to having their own company or, working within a winery or whatever it is. And I try to actually tailor the assignments to people's actual career interests. So, I'll make an assignment. I'll say like, but if like you can't do this or there's something else related to this that you're working on personally, like work with me, and like I'll work with people because I want them to succeed. And yeah, a lot of people, so I'm actually trying to see if there's any way I can find like some entrepreneurial funding or something, because I was able to I got a Perkins grant last year to get wine for tasting for the students, because like I said, some of the students have never even tasted wine. I'm like, how can I be up here talking about wine and they've never tasted wine, So I feel like it's such a important part of understanding wine is to actually taste it. So, we do taste wine in the classes, and there's a lot of different things you can do within wine, and it doesn't have to just be like a server behind the bar. There's just so many different aspects.
So you kind of already answered this. I think it's really cool that you tailor kind of your assignments to the students in your class and what they want to learn and what's going to help them. So how well do you think a collegiate wine education can actually prepare students for real world industry work?
This is a good question because I don't think it can prepare you at all. So I think the only way that you can be part of it is you have to just work in the industry. Yeah, you can have your degree and you could be a total failure when you actually get in the industry because maybe you're like can't talk to people and this is all about people, right? Or like maybe you studied all the, like you're really good at memorizing things, but like maybe you have a really poor palate and like you really can't taste the difference between wines. And so maybe you can't really work as someone that's like pouring wines and telling people about them if like you're not very good at tasting wine. And that maybe that's preparing you for management, but maybe there's not that many roles in management, so there might not be a fit for you. So I think that just depends, but it's not really necessarily a path. Like I think people could, feel like, oh, I need to do that in order to get this job. No, you just need to start. And then I think also if you just start within the industry and see, try different kind of aspects of the industry, and you might be really good at one thing, you never knew. So then when you start pursuing that path, that's when you could, say, hey, I want to pursue this kind of certification, or like, I want to learn a little bit more about this. That's when it makes more sense than if you just kind of like, go to college and then you just like arrive in wine country. Because that happened to me actually when I first came out here. I already had my MBA in luxury brand management. I had a master's, I had a bachelor's, I had worked internationally, and none of that mattered. I literally started as a host, and then I worked my way up and I was, the manager of marketing and business development at Almondsville Winery, and I did so many fun things there. Then I've worked as a server and I've worked as a tour guide, so I feel like I've done a lot. I've helped with production, and I've gotten familiar with being in the vineyards and, the agricultural practices. So I feel like I have a really well-rounded understanding. With us working here at Wine Country, we're actually having like the 360 view of everything that goes into wine production and then tasting the wine as well. We actually have such an advantage being out here that it's part of everything that we just see daily. And most people don't have this in their backyard.
In traditional wine education, are there any career paths you think are underrepresented or things people should be trained for, but they aren't?
Well, there's actually some very cool career paths that I think are cool that are like if you look at, I was reviewing all the profiles of Master Sommelier women. And a lot of people, have their MBA as well, and they'll work for these big companies, right? Like this one lady works for Delta and she curates all the wine that goes in flights. And this other lady is in charge of like the style and ambiance at the bars in the Kimpton hotels. And so like, we don't have that level here in Temecula, but I feel like globally, there are some really interesting jobs in the wine world. And that's kind of an example of where like a college education plus certifications can go really well together, because at that kind of higher level, you're going to be paid a lot for those jobs. One thing I will say that I found from doing these various education pathways is that it can be a bit disjointed, and it's like, if you learn things this style, like even for, I don't know, say WSET and Court of Master Sommeliers, they have different terminology for like what color, the names of the yellows, for what your wine color is, and things like that. So it's like, I feel like people could get very into their own pathway, and that could close you off a little bit from having a more open and global view of what is really happening with wine.
Has your academic background ever given you a different perspective on wine than your colleagues in the trade? And do you think that's helped or hindered you?
Well, I think that I have a totally different background than, I think everyone has a different background than everyone else, right? So, but I think a lot of mine, I always was super curious about traveling and other cultures and all of that. So I think for me, I always went out of my way for study abroad and, doing my MBA in France. I got a full sponsorship. So I've always loved learning, and I've had exposure to a lot of different kinds of professors and students, and even just like friends, and going to people's, families' houses and trying the local wine and the local food. So I feel like everything is kind of like all happened together in my life. And I don't think I could separate out my studies from my experiences and my passion and my knowledge. Like, I think it all just grew together over the years. And here I am all these years later. And I look back and I'm like, wow, like I have had some very interesting experiences and I've learned so much. And people say when you start getting really into the high level of wine, it's like there's still so much more to learn. So that's always really exciting. It's not like, okay, now I know everything. I can, stop now. But it's like you just want to keep going because it's just like this passion and, it's just discovering the world and human beings and, other people's passions that they take all the time to grow these things and, crush them and store them and bottle them. And it takes a lot of effort and passion.
All right, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to do our pour session with Stephanie. We'll see you soon.
All right, we are back with Stephanie Staab, who's going to take the Pour Temecula challenge. She has 2 red wines in front of her. All she knows is that one is from Temecula and one is not from Temecula. And then secondarily, they are both from the same varietal. So if she wants to take a stab at that
was a good one.
You can go ahead and do that. So I will turn it over to you. You can explain or describe these wines in any way you want to.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on your wine tasting challenge. I've been looking forward to this every episode that I listen to, you guys. Yeah, it's pretty fun. Okay, so I have 2 red wines here. I have the one on the left is a lighter ruby, little bit brown red with a clear rim. And on the right, I have one that's a bit of more opaque. It's a bit more of a purple red color, again with a clear rim. I don't see age on either of these wines. I feel like this is Grenache, and I say the one from the left is Temecula. The one on the left has notes of cherry. It's a lighter texture. The one on the right has a lot of tannin. It's dry and has a long finish, and it has this purple color to it. So yeah, that's my assessment. I'm going Grenache, and I'm saying the one on the left is Temecula.
Okay. That's what you're going to go with. Are you sure? How do you feel about it?
I feel great about it because here's my thoughts on blind tasting. Everyone gets so worked up about them, and it's really just like an educational experience, and it really doesn't matter if you guess it right or you don't guess it right. And it's really just the process, the learning process. I always tell my students, tasting with intention. You're not just drinking, you're tasting with intention. And you're seeing like, what color do you see? What kind of texture do you see and feel in your mouth? And especially, I always like to compare 2 wines to each other, because if you're just tasting one wine, it will taste like, oh, this wine is really good. I like it, but then if you taste 2 at the same time, especially if you're doing it like this, where it's the same varietal, but different locations, like it's going to imprint on your tasting memory in your mind. And you'll never forget it after that. So I'm just having a little learning experience here with you guys. So thank you. And I don't know, that's my assessment.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask some more questions. Okay. Otherwise, it's a short segment. So since we are Pour Temecula, Temecula being, in the name, what about number 1 stands out to you that says Temecula? And you've tasted quite a few Temecula wines. You've been in the industry for quite a while here locally. So you might have a better kind of perspective on that.
Normally, maybe the color, you might say the one on the right might be more of a Temecula style. We tend to have more, we're really hot climate here. So even if we have the same varietal as other countries, it might express itself differently in the flavor, the body, and the alcohol level. The one on the right was really dry, though, and had a lot of tannin, which I don't really find a lot in Temecula. I feel like everything here is very more like fruit-forward style and not necessarily as much, say, like aging. The one on the left, to me, seemed a little bit more, less tannin. Although it had a kind of like a thinner body, it still feels like a high alcohol wine to me. And kind of like the flavor, the fruit flavor just seems a bit more of like a warm climate, fruit forward experience.
Okay. And what makes you think Grenache over any other varietal?
Oh, I don't know. So I feel like here in Temecula, we love to take things that are traditionally blended grapes and then turn them into single varietals.
I feel like that's a California thing versus a Temecula thing.
Maybe. Kind of bugs me because I learned about wine in Europe, and sometimes I feel like there's a reason why things are blended because you get a greater expression and complexity that way. But I've found that it's very, very popular, and I see a lot of like single varietal locally. But it could be throughout California.
Yeah, I feel like for me personally, it brings better balance. So I think a grape that you see a lot here in Temecula is Mourvedre or Monastral.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a varietal by itself is really that compelling, as 100%. And you see a lot of 100% of that here. Whereas in Southern Rhone, you can get some Mourvedre that is like 65%, 70%, and still has quite a bit of Syrah or Cinsault put into it to balance it out.
And I also feel like in Europe, over hundreds and thousands of years, people have figured out what goes together well. So I do actually enjoy buying wines from Europe because you kind of have this guarantee that it's going to be a certain style and certain quality and certain way that it was made. So I find that interesting, and it just seems like, they've figured out that certain things do go well together. Another single varietal that really bugs me out here is Petite Syrah. Like, that is so hard for me to handle by itself. So, yeah, some of them. But then again, we might have...
This is not Petite Syrah.
Obviously.
So, obviously. Or it's a Petite Syrah rosé. So we'll go ahead and give up the gig. I think you're the first person to get it 100% correct.
You nailed it.
You absolutely nailed it.
Oh, my gosh. Do I get an award?
You get 2 glasses of wine. So it's your reward. The first wine is from Bolero. It is a 2018 Grenache, and it is from, Europa Village, Bolero, Europa Village. So, Temecula
I just want to
Valley,
say I am
#1.
so proud of myself right now.
And it does present itself as very pale in the glass. There just aren't that many, but there's only a limit to how pale it was and how see-through it was, transparent it was, that it could be. And then the second wine, so this is a wine that actually includes 10% of Carignan, and it's from the Languedoc region in southwest France. Shannon and I were talking before we hit record about how I personally find that the wines from Temecula are more in the style of that area of France than Spain or Portugal or the Rhone Valley, because we do see a lot of Grenache, we see a lot of Syrah. I don't think we see much Carignan here in the area.
I've never heard of that being planted here.
Cinsault and some other varietals that are more aromatic on the white side. I thought it was a good comparison. So 90%
that was really
Grenache.
fun.
And the second one you can almost pick up. Me knowing it had Carignan in it.
Yeah,
Carignan's very purple.
I was going to say that
It has a
that must
tinge more purple. It would have definitely been
tricky.
tricky if the first wine didn't kind of scream Grenache.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for having me on your challenge. That was exhilarating.
Well, we're not done yet because you have to answer what are you going to pair with In and Out.
Okay. So I was analyzing the In and Out situation, and I did and I would actually like to say something that I just want to share that everyone has had a different pairing that has come on your show, and these are all wine experts, right? So I think that shows that there's not one right answer of what wine to pair with foods. And sometimes people get really, really caught up on that, like this is the only thing that you can do, and it's not the case. What I think sounds really interesting is that currently I am, as we discussed, studying for the sparkling wine module of the WSET Diploma, which I'm taking next week. And so I've been tasting a lot of sparkling wines from the world, and some, again, like we said before, but like things I've never tried or I probably never would try unless I had this course that inspired me to do so. A lot of times when we're pairing wine with food, it's a lot about the flavors in the sauce, right? So the texture of your meal, if there's meat or not, or another like kind of like fat source, things like that. But I was thinking with the In-N-Out burger, the sauce is really prominent, and it's a sweet sauce. So it's mayo, ketchup, and sweet relish mixed together. And so you're getting a lot of that sweetness that's coming through with that burger. And so here's a wine that I just tried that I've never had before. And I was thinking, wow, this is a perfect wine to match with that burger. It is sparkling Shiraz from Australia. Have either of you guys ever tried that?
Yes.
I have not.
Yeah. So it's like interesting because apparently they drink that around Christmas time. And so they are flip-flopped with their weather compared to here, right? So it's like summer weather and Christmas. So it's a chilled red wine that's effervescent. So it's like you could still drink your red wine, but it's refreshing, right? But it does have kind of like some residual sugar in it. And so I thought, oh my gosh, this is the perfect wine to pair with the In-N-Out burger. And then I was thinking about a lot of people, you know, like you and HB saying that you like to have like the grilled cheese vegetarian version. And I was thinking in that case, the wine I think would be really nice to pair with that is Rosé Prosecco. Because that also has a tiny bit of residual sugar. And then with the rosé, I think that's like the perfect flavor to, again, complement that sauce, plus the cheese that's kind of like highlighted in that one. So yes, I did prepare for that. I was actually going to go there and get like every different style of In-N-Out and test them all. But my daughter was like, Mom.
You know, I have thought about a future podcast is where we just order a bunch of burgers and grilled cheeses, and then we have a pairing.
Well, here's what I think. I think you should have a competition, like a pair off, right? Like all the ones that everyone has suggested.
Actually go try them.
And then we should like have everyone meet up, and we'll have to like do a tasting and with the, you know, pieces of the burger and the sips of the wine. I think that would be a really fun party.
I love that idea.
Yeah. So if Nate Rivera is listening and wants to loan us 2 travelers one night, we'll just bring it in and out.
I think
at one point in time, I believe Akash had an In-N-Out
they had
truck.
The truck come.
They had come up
a few
there.
times.
So I guess we'll have to ask Akash that question. He should have that answer right away. You know, it's one of his, and he should pitch his own wine, of course. All right, well, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming out today. A little bit of wind here. Would like to thank Frangipani for hosting us again.
This is a beautiful location.
So thanks to them, and thank you for coming out. So,
thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's really fun.
Cheers.
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 Over the past 2 episodes, we've taken a closer look at wine certifications, why people pursue them, what options are out there, and how they can shape a career. Some use them to build credibility, others for personal growth, and others just for a deeper understanding. In our most recent conversation, we explored how certifications compare to college-level wine education and how both theory and real-world experience play a role in preparing people for the industry. Whether you're already working in wine or thinking about jumping in, these programs can be valuable tools, but they're just one part of a much bigger journey. There's no single reason or path. As I've been teasing the last few weeks, our new podcast, The Short Pour, 15-minute quick takes on wine and beverage, drops this week. You'll find a simulcast of it right here on Pour Temecula. Our first episode dives into history, culture, cuisine, and, of course, the wine of Tuscany, focusing on the iconic Chianti Classico. We hope you enjoy it. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to Pour Temecula and leave us a review. It really helps to keep the conversation flowing. Follow us on social media for behind-the-scenes content and updates on upcoming guests. Until next time, keep exploring, keep sipping, and cheers.